What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millzy, back with Hometown Commander. We are back for another episode of Top 10 of 2022, and today we are doing Enchantments, my second favorite card type, because unfortunately you can't turn them sideways like you can creatures, but I love Enchantments. I am an Enchantress player. I enjoy it. I have a couple enchantment decks that I really love. And there were a lot of really great enchantments this year. This year brought my love back for multiple different enchantment decks, and we're going to talk about them across the process of this top 10. But I think that's enough pleasantries aside. Let's get into the top 10. Number 10, we have Meticulous Excavation, a uncommon from the Brothers War. Some of you may have never seen this card before, but the reason I love this card, 1 and a white, and it comes down, and for 2 and a white, you can return target permanent you control to its owner's hand. If it has an earth, instead exile it, then return it to its owner's hand. Activate only during your turn. A lot of you are going to look at this enchantment and go, Millzy, this is a draft uncommon. Why is this card good? Well, the deck that I think this card shines in is Sithis Harvest Hand, one of my favorite Enchantress decks that I've played. And the reason I like this one is it allows you to bounce things back to your hand. If you have a ton of mana and not a lot of cards in your hand, what this does is allows you to dump mana into this, bring your enchantments you already have down back into your hand, and replay them to draw more cards, get more triggers, keep your turn going. And that's very important for Sithis, because if you can't draw enough cards to keep your hand full, you tend to run out or get bogged down with lands. And so I think Meticulous Excavation allows you to bounce things back, replay those cheap things like Authority of the Consuls or things like that. Keep replaying them, and decks like Sithis will eventually go into near infinite mana, so you're not worried about the 3 mana to bounce something back to your hand. There's no restriction of doing this only once per turn. You literally get to just reap the benefits of this card, and it only comes down for 1 white, which is really important in that deck, and that's why it is my number 10. At number 9, we have one of 2 backgrounds on the list, an Inspiring Leader. A background that says, commander creatures you own have creature tokens you control get +2/+2. If you know anything about me and you know anything about the decks that I enjoy, this card is on here because I have fallen in love with Jetmir. It's my favorite deck of the year that I built, and this card is an all-star in that. Jetmir coming down and buffing all your tokens even more. And what I like about Inspiring Leader with Jetmir is that if you can't hit your 9 creature threshold with Jetmir, Inspiring Leader still pumps up your tokens enough to take advantage of that vigilance or trample that they have. In some of the other decks that I have, Inspiring Leader just helps buff all the tokens you already have. In my Layla deck, this makes those flying fairies even bigger and even harder to block in combat and do more damage. I like Inspiring Leader. I don't think it needs to just be played in a background. I think this is almost an auto-include in any token deck in white. I think this is just as good as Intangible Virtue. I think this has a lot of great things in it, and I think it can potentially replace a Glorious Anthem or something like that, although the only caveat to remember there is you only get your background when your commander is out. If your commander's not out, the background shuts off, and so that's the only downside. But in a token deck where you require your commander to produce value, I think Inspiring Leader is perfect and exactly what you should be running. Number 8, we have probably the flashiest enchantment on this list, in that it got a lot of people's heads turned when this one got released, and that's Legion Loyalty from Commander Legends 2. And creatures you control have Myriad, a card without reminder text that is 5 words long, and I think this card is a ton of fun in theory. I have yet to play the card, I have yet to get the card to work, but I think in theory this is so much fun. You got to avoid playing it in Legendary Matters decks, because you're going to end up without a mirror box or something like that. You're going to end up just losing the tokens when they come out. But for a deck like Ishin, or a deck where you're going wide and you're getting all those attack triggers and getting lots of fun things, I think Legion Loyalty can put in a lot of really good value. And I want to lose to it so bad. I think this is such a cool card, and I can't wait to see it get played more and more. Number 7, we have Invigorating Hot Spring, from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. I love Rhythm of the Wild. Rhythm of the Wild is an enchantment from Ravnica Legions that gives your non-token creatures a choice of either a +1/+1 counter or haste, and Rhythm of the Wild is a staple in any creature deck that has both red and green in it, especially if you're trying to win the game by combat. I don't think Invigorating Hot Spring is the same level, but I think in any deck that cares about +1/+1 counters, this is exactly going to work the same way. It comes in with 4 +1/+1 counters on it. All modified creatures you control have haste. Anything that has an equipment on it, anything that has an aura on it, or anything that has counters on it has haste. And then you can remove a +1/+1 counter from it to put a counter on a creature you control, and you can activate it only as a sorcerer only once per turn. This is a fervor for decks that with +1/+1 counter decks that's almost strictly better, because you have the option to put counters on creatures with it to help give them upside as well. I love this card. I have a couple decks where I've been trying this card out in to good and bad success depending on the deck. But I think this is the kind of card that will get better over time. It'll get its good utility, and people will end up using it 3 or 4 years down the line, just like they're using Rhythm of the Wild now. I can really see this going into those Chishiro decks, those red-green deck, Hydra decks, things like that. They're going to use this. They're going to have good success with it, and I can't wait to see this card kind of blow up over time as people realize that it's very good and use it in the scenarios where they need to use it. Number 6, we have Biotransference from Warhammer 40k. I think this card has a lot of text. People probably haven't read it. But what I really like about this card is, as creatures you control are artifacts in addition to the other types. The same is true for creature spells you control and creature cards you own that aren't on the battlefield. So basically every creature you can play or will play while this card is out as an artifact, and then whenever you cast an artifact spell, you lose a life and make a 2/2 artifact creature token. These enchantments that make artifacts when you cast artifacts are very popular. That's why Sai is such a good legendary creature. But the thing I like about Biotransference is you're adding the ability to make your creatures artifacts in a color where aristocrat strategies are the most prevalent. You have things like Marionette Master and Nadir's Nightblade and Disciple of the Vault. They already care about you sacrificing artifacts. Well, if you make all your creatures artifacts, now you're 2 for 1 with Bastion of Remembrance or things like that. So I really like Biotransference in both the aristocrat side and in just the general artifact decks that are going to take advantage of all their cards being artifacts, using their tokens that they make that aren't artifacts already to be artifacts and kind of using them in. I think this pairs really well with a card like Mycosynth Lattice in being very similar in what it does and how it makes all of your creatures artifacts. Now, Mycosynth Lattice is a little bit better, and that allows you to tap all your mana for any color, but I think Biotransference has its spot. It's a very pricey card at the moment. I think it'll stay that way because people are going to realize over time, how good this one is and how it's going to get better. At number 5, we have a card that when I read it for the first time, I said it's probably not a good call, Wizards. Maybe we shouldn't do that, but they did. It's Reign of Riches from the new Capenna Commander set. There's a couple cards this year where I looked at them and said, Wizards, I'm going to break this card because you printed it, and I hope that you're okay with it. We'll talk about another one next week when we talk about instants and sorceries. But Reign of Riches says when it enters the battlefield, you get 2 treasure tokens. So for 5 mana, you're coming in and getting 2 treasures. But the ability that I think really matters and gets to be kind of rough when you use it in the right way, it says the first spell you cast each turn that has mana from a treasure that was spent to cast it has Cascade. So this isn't like a Double Vision or a Jin Gitaxias where it says the first of X spell you cast each turn no matter what, which can be hard to get them down before you do those things. The cool part about Reign of Riches is a lot of times you're probably not going to have treasures before you dump the Reign of Riches in. So what's cool here is you're going to get the treasures and then be able to use that ability right away. But this is an enchantment that fits into every sacrifice deck that cares, or a red treasure deck that cares about treasures anyway. This just adds Cascade for the first spell each turn. I think this fits into a lot of spell slinging decks. I've seen a lot of success with this in decks like Kess and Abaddon that already care about doing this Cascade thing or doing these big spell things anyway. I think Reign of Riches just adds another level of success on top of it. I've tried my hand at Reign of Riches in my Miram Dragons list, which has a little bit of a treasure sub-theme because of some of those dragons, and it does a very good job in that as well. So if you have a treasures deck, I think Reign of Riches should be top of the list for you in that deck. But if you have a red deck that could use those treasures, or you think you could use that Cascade, check out Reign of Riches. I think you can do a lot of good for you. 5 mana may seem like a lot for that ability, but the first time you dump that treasure into an 8 or 9 CMC spell and get the whole world off of it on Cascade, you'll come back and you'll understand why Reign of Riches is as good as it is. At number 4, we have another background, and that's Agent of the Iron Throne. We talked about this. I tried not to mention this card before in this list when I was talking about aristocrat decks, but I think this is probably one of the best cards they got this year, Commander creatures you own have whenever an artifact or creature you control is put in the graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent loses a life. Artifact or creature is really, really important because all of those Chatterfang, Corvold, all of those decks that are doing this anyway, sacking these things, getting the Bastion Remembrance triggers or the Pitiless Plunderer triggers, getting all that value. Now you're just adding another level of value on top of that. And now you have another way out of winning a game by just sacrificing your creatures for value and doing what you want to do anyway. The reason I like Agent of the Iron Throne is it kind of attritions your opponents out in an Aristocrats deck or when you're trying to do the things you're trying to do already. That 1 or 2 life a turn or even 5 or 6 life in a big turn goes to each opponent, and you're just knocking your opponents down. And eventually you're going to clean them out because you pair this with a Bastion Remembrance, or you pair this with a Marionette Master, or you pair this with any of the other cards that you can use that have similar effects. And it's not just 1 life now. Now it's 2 or 3 every time you do it. And all you need is a decent-sized board of tokens. And you can even end the game at instant speed with all these triggers on the stack. That's why I really like Ancient Iron Throne. Now, the only downside is it is a background, right? So you have to have your commander out to have to be able to have its ability. It doesn't have to, of course, remember backgrounds. You can play in the 99, so you can use them in any deck, but you have to have your commander to do it. But I would argue that any deck that wants to do this wants their commander out anyway, so you don't mind that being the downside. And the best part is, as long as these triggers hit the stack, whether they remove your commander or not, they still go off. And so that's what I think is really important about this card as well, is it kind of... I think a lot of these Aristocrat decks do really well because they set up this nuke button where they have all of these things waiting. And as soon as someone wants to do something they don't want to do, they hit the button, sack everything, get all these triggers. And now you have to respond at instant speed to try to stop this mess that just got created. And I think Agent of the Iron Throne just contributes to that in the right way that you want. Number 3, one of my favorite token enchantments of the year is Rabble Rousing. Again, this card went primarily in Jetmir, but I have been trying to play it in some other lists. Hideaway 5, so you look at the top 5, put a card that you want face down underneath it, exiled underneath it, put the rest on the bottom. It says whenever you attack with one or more creatures, create that many 1/1 citizen creature tokens. So for every creature you attack with, you're getting a token to replace it. This is so good in Jetmir because you could easily go from 4 or 5 creatures to 9 or 10 very quickly, and your opponents won't see it coming. Then, if you control 10 or more creatures, you may play the exiled card without paying its mana cost. And the best part about this Hideaway card is, as soon as you play that card from underneath it, sure, you don't get to hide away again, but you still get to keep making the tokens every time you attack. And all you need is an Impact Tremors or a Perforos or some other way to take advantage of creatures coming in or sacrificing them for mana to make Rebel Rousing more than worth it. I love this card. It's my favorite card to play in Jetmir because it just pushes your strategy so far forward. And I think it is one of my favorite cards that got released in Streets of New Capenna. Cool part is this was not a commander card. This was in the set, and that makes it even easier to find than it would have been if it had been in a deck. Number 2, man, this would be my number 1 if it wasn't for the deck that I will talk about after this. I am in love with Arcane Bombardment. This is one of my favorite cards of the year because it took a deck that I already wanted to play and made it even more fun to play. This card is the reason I built Kess Dissonant Mage. This is the reason I built that deck because I said, wouldn't it be fun to put a Jessica's Will, an extra turn spell, and a bunch of other stuff underneath an Arcane Bombardment and just keep the train rolling as you have fun slinging spells and hurting your opponents along the way. And Arcane Bombardment has not let me down. Now that Kess list is built with a lot of duplicate protection and that we have other effects that do other things. We're not just trying to tutor up Arcane Bombardment every game, but when we get it out, it is a mess to deal with. And as soon as you stick an extra turn spell on Arcane Bombardment, you in all reality can never untap. Opponents will never untap unless you run out of spells to play. But in all reality, Arcane Bombardment is well worth the 6 mana. It's a ton of fun to play. And all you need is a 1,000-Year Storm or something like that, and you're going to have a ton of fun. I love this card, and I am so happy that it came out at the time it did, that it pushed me to make my first Grixis spell-slinging deck, and I have loved it ever since. If you have a spell-slinging deck and you think you can use Arcane Bombardment to your advantage in red, please check out the card. It's one of my favorites, and I really, really love it. If I was going to pick any card from this video to tell you to go check out, it would be Arcane Bombardment. But number 1 spot is a little facetious because it's not just 1 card, it's 6. Last year, and by last year I mean 2021, before Kamigawa came out, I had put together a Cis-A Shrines list. I love playing Enchantress decks, and the Shrines seemed very interesting. There were these enchantments that worked together. All of their abilities got better as you got more of them. And M21 gave us the Sanctums and Sanctum of All, which did a very good job at getting the rest of them, and the deck felt so good. And the original Shrines were from Kamigawa. So when I saw we were going back to Kamigawa, I said, man, I really hope that we see new shrines. Wouldn't it be really cool if we got not only new shrines, but we got a new shrine commander? And Wizards delivered with 6 new shrines in the set. Asterisk on that, depending on what else. If there's like a couple like shrine store that can go get shrines, but I mean typed shrines. There are 6 new ones. Go Shintai Shrines Commander and 5 new enchantment creatures. I was trying to push myself to not include creatures, enchantment creatures on this list, because we could talk about Jukai Naturalist and a lot of those other enchantment creatures that are great. But to me, this took everything that I wanted from the Shrines deck, made it even better, and gave it a new, weird-looking face. And I love these. I love the Shrines. They're my favorite 5-color deck that I've tested and put together. And I'm happy to say that I am still learning more about that deck every day, but it's a deck that I really enjoy. And so thank you, Wizards, for printing more shrines. I hope that in the future we can get some more. I would love to go up from the 17 that we have now to 22 or 23 or whatever you choose to do next. Even if you give us 1 or 2 in a random set or whatever it may be, I'd love to get some more shrines. I'd love to see another cycle of shrines in the future. But I love the shrines. They're a ton of fun to play. I like seeing that Go Shintai made its way onto Arena, and so people have been playing Go Shintai in Historic Brawl, which has been pretty cool as well. But the Go Shintai shrines are my #1 enchantment of the year because they meant so much to me as far as taking a deck I was fairly interested in and making it even better. What do you guys think? What is your favorite or top 3 enchantments of the year? Tell me down in the comments. Leave me a like if you liked my top 10. Tell me how I'm wrong if you think I'm wrong down in the comments. Drop me a subscribe if you want to see some more top 10 content or more Millzy brews up in the next coming year as I brew decks for you guys throughout the year. And I will catch you next time.